Welcome back to this, our third episode of Christ in the Heart of Our Children. I am the Reverend Delilah Jane Phillips.
And I am the Reverend Pen and am glad to be back with you, Delilah Jane, and listeners.
This has been such a fun conversation about how faith is formed in our children, when that faith is important. And today we are going to be talking about how in community we belong to one another. How do we know and show the love of Christ? That's kind of the theme for our church this year, right, Pen?
It is not just kind of a theme, it is the theme.
The whole theme.
The theme for next year and as we lead up to it.
I love that. You know, I've been thinking about how we phrase our conversation today, and I think this is a hard question, but it's an important one. How many baptisms have you, Pen Peary, witnessed here at First Presbyterian Church? First, tell us, how long have you been here?
Yeah, so I've been here this month for 12 years.
Wow.
And I would guess I do about 25 baptisms a year personally. So I'm not great at math, but I think that's about 300 baptisms.
300 baptisms.
300 baptisms.
That is incredible. Yeah. I love baptisms. There's no hiding that. I get teary for everyone's baptism. It just means so much to me to see the baptism happen, for families to bring their children, whether they're babies or toddlers or bigger kids or even adults. Any baptism means so much to me. But I think as a parent, I've really seen a different side of baptisms and just appreciate them in a different way. There's this vow that we take as a congregation that happens during the baptism, and the pastor who's baptizing the child says this. They ask this question of the congregation. They ask, do you, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ, promise to guide and nurture this child by word and deed, with love and prayer, encouraging them to know and follow Christ and to be faithful members of the church? And of course, the church says, we do. I often stand in the front with the kids as they're witnessing the baptisms. And I love to hear the little voices because they've done this enough and they all say, we do, because we do. But when I hear that, every single baptism, we promise to guide and nurture this child by word and deed with love and prayer. I just get so teary-eyed thinking that we are making this commitment to this family and to this child, that we're in this together, right? We're all in this together. I want to jump up and start singing with them, that this is such an important moment for that child's life. That's what I want for my kids. I am so grateful to take the commitment from the church and also commit to the families that I'm going to do that. This is different than other memberships. This is different than any vow I take like at the Y, right?
Oh yeah, I think, because it's collective, right? I mean, I think some places, like the YMCA is a organization that provides a service. So the user, the member, receives a membership that gives them a service for their exercise or their childcare. And that's great. And you can build community among people who participate in those services. But what's different about the church is that you both receive and you give. And there's a duality in what it is to be a member, because we are not, and the church is not an organization where we consume a product. We participate in a program, but we also help lead the program. We receive the support of a church when our kid gets baptized, but we also commit to support the parents of somebody else's kid who's getting baptized. And I think that's one of the things that makes the church kind of uniquely awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And that the entire congregation takes that vow. It's
Right.
not just the children's ministry committee who is sitting on the front row being asked, do you promise to take this one too?
I want to tell you a story that I wasn't planning on sharing, but I'll do it anyways because that's what I do.
Love it.
There was a couple, and they died probably 4 or 5 years ago, but they were in their 80s. They sat on the 3rd or 4th pew behind the baptismal font, and they kind of looked very dour. They were always very put together, and I did not. This was a surprise to me when they told me why they sat in that pew, but they sat there because they had a better view of children's time and they had a better view of the baptismal font so they could be the ones to answer that question. Oh. And I think that, again, it's the whole church, to your point, takes that vow, and people who are the same age as the parents whose kid is getting baptized, or who are octogenarians who dress up in their black suits and their ties and their bonnets, but want to participate in that promise. It's beautiful.
I love that. Does it sound like a lot of work when you say that? We say it a lot. You've heard it 300 times. I doubt you've ever withheld a vote. I know that you always say, I do. Does that sound like a ton of work to jump into their lives like that?
I mean, I think if you were the only one answering that question, it might. But that's the other part about the church, is that you're around 300 plus other people who answer that question. And so, I think many hands make light work.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For me, it's a joyful responsibility, the church. It's a little different. Obviously, I'm on staff here. I know what work goes into the daily classes we offer, or to the whole system as a whole. I take kids in at birth, and we start building this community with them and their parents. And I have them all the way through 5th grade, in which then I move them on to youth group, and the youth group leader takes them from there. And so I know what goes into that. But our role here, for myself as an employee, but also I very much care about this church. This is my church. Our role and what we do for the church is one of support. We talked about faith in homes. We talk about this responsibility as parents being the primary faith example in their homes. The role here is support. We provide a Christian education foundation, age-appropriate Bible lessons, structure that will support you in moving through the many seasons of your family. And they move fast. We're ready. It feels like your kids go from birth to kindergarten to 5th grade really fast, but we are ready, and we're ready with that support. We also provide opportunities for families to engage in putting their faith into action. That's important. There's a switch that goes from, we're learning these basic Bible stories. I can teach preschoolers, these are the highlight Bible stories throughout the Bible. But then there's a switch somewhere along the line, and it's when the families are ready and when the kids are ready that they suddenly put that faith into action. We're a wealth of knowledge and resources, providing classes and opportunities week in and week out, but also we provide tradition keeping and a place to give everyone a community of faith in which they can journey with. But we are but resources.
Right.
We have it all ready, but
and that's, again, the thing about the gift and the responsibility, which is not a burden, but is a privilege of the church, is that we share in that ministry with one another. So another story that I've got, I'm full of stories today.
Love it.
And this is going to build a little while, so go with me.
Okay.
But before we renovated the sanctuary, the floor of the sanctuary was really old, and it was actually unstable. That's one reason why we had to renovate it. But there was one thing that I miss about the renovated sanctuary, and that is the sound of when the congregation would stand up and answer that question you talked about a minute ago at baptism, where the congregation would stand up and say, it's not just the church's job, it's our job too. And so right before the minister or the elder would ask that question, do you agree to support this family? They would say, would the congregation please stand? And in the old sanctuary, at that moment, everybody in the church would stand up and you could hear the floor like groan and squeak.
Yeah.
And what I loved is that, what made that floor squeaky was the fact that people had been standing up for 100+ years to say, yes, we're going to be a part of the church. Like that sound to me is what it sounds like for the church to answer the call and the commitment to do this together. So it's not just, again, the church is the service provider that gives you, the consumer, what you need, but it's the church is the support, but we do that work in collective.
We were never meant to do it alone.
Never alone.
That sound, that groan is all of us.
That's right.
From those who went before us and
those in 100 years, that floor is going to groan again because we keep on standing up.
That we sure do at a rapid rate around here. We stand up. I love that story. So how do we take that commitment to families? How do we know what we have to offer? We know that we have the Bible stories and we have the structure as far as Sunday school and classes and curriculums, and we have that ready for them. How do we take that and put it into action? Mm-hmm. We've taught them the Bible stories. How do we give them the action piece? We know Christ. Mm-hmm. How do we show Christ? Tell us more about our theme for the year.
Yeah. So it's kind of like two sides of the same coin. So on one side of the coin is helping people understand that they are loved unconditionally and they're saved by Christ and they are accepted by God. And I think that is absolutely fundamental to what we do not want anybody to come into this church and doubt that they are loved by God and saved by Christ.
We do a great job of that.
We do a great job of that. And Bible stories teach us that, and worship reminds us of that. The things we learn in Sunday school help us with that. But it doesn't stop there, because if you know that you're loved by Christ and you know that, you have been the recipient of God's grace, then the other side of the coin is that you can't help but show that same love to other people. And you talked a minute ago about kind of the time in Sunday school when kids and families are ready to kind of move from like the story to the action. I think that's the thing with know and show. Like we not only want people to be assured of the fact that they are loved, but once they are assured of that, then it's like a contagious thing, and they then turn and they share that love with their classmate or their neighbor or the person who is homeless in Charlotte who they made a blessing bag for. And like both of those things are true at the same time. So I see those as two sides to the same coin.
It's like God is in the groan and God is in the commitment, and that, the Holy Spirit has stirred in us a sense of calling from knowing the stories of the Bible, from knowing the stories of Christ.
And if you think about the stories of the Bible, that's when people have an encounter with Christ, when they're healed or when they see a miracle or when they hear a lesson, what do? They turn and they run and they tell people, or they heal other people, or they go off on their own missionary journey. And so that's, I think what's really important about that too is that people are clear about who loves them. There's not a question of kind of, we're not just loved generically, we're loved by God and Jesus Christ. And on the other side, as they share love, they're clear about what motivates that love. It's not just to be a good person, but they want to share the love that they've seen in Jesus Christ. And so I would hope that, with this theme guiding us throughout the year, with all ages, adults, youth, and children, it'd be great if our folks could recognize that the person they're loved by is Jesus, and the reason they love other people is because of Jesus too.
We've seen it. We know how this works.
Right.
If you open your Bible and you read the stories, you're going to be inspired to do something about it.
That's right.
I think about the disciples and how the disciples were called into ministry. They were living their lives, and they had that encounter with Jesus. Which of the call stories do you like?
Well, I like a lot of them. But, I think the earliest calls to the disciples, what's really neat about them is that the disciples, in some way, they say yes to something they don't quite understand in the moment. Mm-hmm. So they're impacted by the grace and love of Jesus, and they want to follow, and then they kind of figure out what that means later on in their life. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes, like especially in this day and age, we like to know all the details and understand all the implications before we make a commitment. But that's not the Christian life. The Christian life is we're claimed before we can ask for it. Mm. And then we learn along the way what it is to put that faith into action. And so when Simon and Peter get called by Jesus, they're fishermen, and they literally drop their nets and they follow immediately. That's what the Gospel of Mark says. Yeah. It's immediately. So, I think that's the lesson for us, is that God has already said yes to us. It's time for us to say yes to God, and then we will learn along the way what it is that we can do to help show that love to other people.
And that is Christ in the heart of our children.
That's right.
That we give them these opportunities to learn the stories.
There's growth. They don't learn it all at one time.
No.
They follow a very organized and intentional curriculum and lesson plan that builds on itself. I know you do a lot of that in all your good work and with your teachers.
Well, there's a lot of age-appropriate learning. We learn at the preschool level that God created us and that we are good and that we are loved, and God has more of a plan for us through Jesus Christ, and that the church works. That's the scope of the church when you're little. And then we add in these encounters that we only come to understand because we understand relationships. And then as they grow, they look around at their church and they see action. They see the church taking out food. They see the church working in the community, and they want to be part of that. So what we do here as a church, and what we have committed to the families here, is that we give them this opportunity. We just need people to come in and to commit to that with us. And I love to see it happen. I love when the church does what it says it's going to do and commits to the families all the way through. Even when we don't understand. I like that line. You said they didn't really understand what they were going to do, the disciples. They heard about Jesus. They knew of him. They knew it was a good thing. Something was stirred in their hearts. And they followed Jesus.
And I've seen people make that choice when their parents make it for them when they're kids. And I've seen people make that choice when they're 60 years old and have been away from the church for 50 years. So there's always a moment to make that choice.
I love that. So I want to make one more cry out for our Christian parenting cohort. So this is a really grassroots effort for a bunch of parents who are into this, who want to grow together and come together in Christian parenting here at First Presbyterian. It's going to be an in-person event, which we always still are so happy to have in-person events. We're going to begin on September 29th, and for 5 weeks, this cohort will get to know one another through Sunday school, fellowship, and open conversation about the how and the why of parenting through faith. Here's what I'm hearing from people who are thinking about coming to this group. They say, it would be so nice to be in community with people who get it, people who feel the same pressures I feel. And I want to add, I see this as a place where we can cultivate some ideas and best practices together. Let's talk about what's working for you. Can I borrow that? Can I meet you there? Sometimes all I need is a friend to show up and help, and I'll make it happen. I think this group is just that for people. I'm really excited to see it happen. So you can sign up at our website if you go to firstprescharlotte.org. and go to the formation page for children. The sign up is on that page for the cohort. I will love to see you there. I'm really excited about the conversations that will happen. Pen, thank you so much for your support in this.
It's been awesome.
It means so much to have a leader for our church who cares about these families. And I know that you have fulfilled your commitment every single one of those baptisms. And it really means a lot to me. You weren't there at my children's baptisms, but because of the Church Universal, I know
That's
that
right.
it's the same promise for them and for my family. And I really appreciate that.
Amen.